What's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I'm your host, Cody Goodwin. We've got Nathan King from Auburn Undercover back here to talk some more Iron Bowl basketball. Nathan, we did like the Auburn Undercover podcast Roll Pod collab the first time because this was a 1-2 matchup. The first time these guys played in Tuscaloosa, literally less than a month ago. A lot of things have changed since then. Before we actually get into the matchup and what's changed and what to expect on Saturday at Neville, how are you doing, man? Like, it's March. Like, are you surviving the season? Is it more fun to cover the best team in the country regularly? Like, how are your mentals holding up?
It's been good, man. Definitely looking forward to what this month will bring. The first game of March for Auburn was I had never been to Rupp before, so I made the trip to Lexington, and so that was obviously like a momentous Saturday for this program. Lots of things happened for them. They broke their Rupp streak, 37-year drought, and then they won the SEC outright later in the day because of Tennessee beating Alabama. And so, work to do for this team after losing Texas A&M on Tuesday. Level of concern, not a ton, I don't think, and especially because of what's coming up on Saturday. Like, these teams don't need stakes to be hyped for this game. They don't need, championships on the line. It's Auburn, it's Alabama, and it's the return game in Neville Arena. So, yeah, I mean, really looking forward to what this month will bring. Auburn's done a lot in the regular season. They've accomplished so many of their goals already. We'll see what happens in the tournament.
So after Tennessee hits the game winner to beat Alabama and help Auburn clinch the SEC outright, all those videos came out about the guys on the bus watching the game winner and celebrating, and it was, A+ content. Shout out Auburn Athletics. Were you surprised at the number of Auburn players that knew Rocky Top? Like, I was kind of not that it's not a catchy song, but I was kind of impressed that they were just boom, right into the jingle. Like, that was kind of cool.
They've got some older guys, as has been made clear. So I mean, they've played there a lot. They know that team well. Bruce has said multiple times that it's great to be at Tennessee Vol. I just think, that whole thing was, I'd be interested to see how it would have played out with, even if it was Tennessee, but beating someone else other than Alabama. I think most people know that celebration had nothing to do with the fact that it was Alabama. I mean, Arkansas could have beaten South Carolina by 50, and they would celebrate the same way because they accomplished their goal of getting the outright championship. Now, is that to say that Auburn fans didn't enjoy that being what they call a double eagle, which is winning and Alabama losing the same day? Of course you're going to enjoy that. Alabama would have enjoyed it on the other end if the circumstances had been the same. So yeah, it was we were sitting around one person's computer on press row at Rupp Arena, and just kind of stunned in disbelief. And then you have to redirect yourself, okay, now I got to go post the story really quick. That was fun watching the end of that game, and now you got to go get onto your business. But yeah, you and I talked about it before we got rolling. I mean, this league this year to clinch outright with a full week remaining, it's ridiculous. And it goes to speak to the body of work Auburn's had all season.
That's kind of a good place to start. Less than a month ago, Alabama and Auburn played Coleman Coliseum. Auburn won 94-85, took a 9-0 lead early in the game, ended up winning by 9 points. Alabama made it interesting in the second half, hit some big shots, came back and tied it twice. Auburn was able to pull away, win the game. Since then, Alabama has lost 4 of 6 games. They're 23-7, 12-5 in the SEC. They have fallen off the 1 line when it comes to the NCAA tournament. They will either be the 3 or the 4 seed in Nashville next week at the SEC tournament. Auburn, meanwhile, went on to win 4 more games after that. They're now 27-3, 15-2. Like you mentioned, they were able to beat Kentucky at Rupp Arena, first time since 1988. In doing so, they clinched the SEC regular season outright. They have probably secured a 1 seed at the NCAA tournament. They're still vying, I believe, with Duke for the number 1 overall seed in March Madness. I wanted to start here, Nathan. I know it's little while ago, and we've seen a lot of ball since. But what were kind of your initial impressions, your big picture takeaways from the first Alabama-Auburn game?
Yeah, I mean, just you came away so impressed. Not to say I didn't think Auburn could or would win that game, but I think that was sort of the beginning of, and it was hammered home against Kentucky as well. Not that Kentucky is as good of a team as Alabama, but like it hammered home the precedent that I don't think anyone can beat Auburn if they're playing their best. And that I think that extends nationally, and maybe I'm a little, again, when you're so close to it, you kind of pick apart flaws or whatever. Maybe I'm a little late to that conversation, but Auburn went in there and played a tremendous game in Tuscaloosa. And it really felt like you said, it was wire to wire, felt like they were in control. Defense and shot making is going to win you a lot of games. And that was kind of the calling card for them in Tuscaloosa. Now, Alabama missed some shots, and as you and I talked about on the 24/7 sports preview of this game, you have to think Alabama's going to make a little bit more of those rather than going 5 of 26 from deep. But you know what? Credit to Auburn, where it's due. I thought Denver Jones, and we can get into it a little bit more later, but that is somebody you're definitely keeping your eye on in this game, because while Auburn's deep, they got a lot of different dudes, he is their best backcourt defender, and he did a tremendous job of staying in front of Mark Sears, if not just like making life a little more difficult. And then when you start to see those shots not going in, if you're Mark Sears in Alabama, then it kind of snowballs for the rest of the game. And so that was something that, look, they really missed him against Texas A&M on Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, and then the shot making part of it. I mean, Auburn opened up the second half. It was Denver Jones. He made 3 3-pointers in the first 4 minutes of the second half. Janai Broom had a big 3-pointer at the beginning of that game. Miles Kelly, Cheney Johnson, who is not a great 3-point shooter, made 2 threes in that game. And it was just timely shots. I thought probably the best shot of the entire season for Auburn was Alabama ties the game, and Todd Pettiford, who has never probably felt the emotion of fear in his entire life, just like walks back up the court and chucks it from 30 feet and puts Auburn back ahead. And that just kind of goes to show, how many different dudes this team has. But yeah, I mean, it's going to take a really, really good performance for Auburn on Saturday. Is it going to take that good of a performance? They would hope not. They would hope that their home court pays off. They would hope that they're able to, play well across the board and kind of ride that home crowd on a senior day, on the last day of the regular season. Like you mentioned, they're still vying for number 1 overall. I'm maybe one of these idiots that thinks that, like, I think it's done. I would give Auburn number 1 overall already. I understand Duke, but there's no catching this resume. There's actually no even coming close to catching this resume. And so I get, end of season stuff, and if Duke is looking really good, but regardless, like you said, they already have a number 1 seed, locked away. But I think that was my biggest takeaway from that first game, is that it was, to me, a resounding message of Auburn has this gear. They have the gear to go on the road against a really good Alabama team and look really good and win a 1 versus 2 game. That's the gear they will need to win a national championship. I thought they captured it in that one. Thought they captured it last week. They beat Ole Miss by 30. Thought they captured it against Kentucky on the road. How many times can you capture it in March? Can you capture it again on Saturday? I think this team has the potential to be one of the greats this season. And, for them, it's all about getting that confidence and improving, and beating your rival on the last day of the regular season would certainly go a long way in having that confidence going into the postseason.
I think the thing that became abundantly clear in that first Alabama-Auburn game was that Auburn, and you can say the same thing about Duke. I think you can largely say the same thing about Florida, but those are probably the only 3 teams. Auburn has this, like, they're very steady. Like, they're very, what you're going to get from them. You know what you're going to get from Broom. You know what you're going to get from the defense. Like, there's something, I don't know. It inspires confidence that, you are going to have to beat them, because more often than not, Auburn is not going to beat themselves. Whereas Alabama, the highs are really high. The lows are also kind of frustrating. And there are some times where you see both of them over the course of 40 minutes. And I think that first game, you saw a little bit of that. Like, the slow start. There were a handful of turnovers. They were able to punch back, but they didn't have another counterpunch when Petford walked back down the court, hit the 3 to give Auburn the lead, and they never, it was never tied again from that point. So just Auburn, very steady, very consistent. Like, they're just going to kind of swallow you. And Alabama, like, when they're playing high and they're playing really well, they could be one of the best teams in the country. But then they also just have, like, just some weird head scratching lows. And it's just very, very weird. That was the thing that became abundantly clear to me, is that Auburn is just very steady, very consistent, very overwhelming all the time. Alabama can be overwhelming, but it seems like things have to be clicking for them to kind of play their best basketball. And I think that's the difference between a team that we know is probably going to contend for a national title in Auburn and a team that has the talent and we think they can, like Alabama, but we got to see it. They're an inconsistent team sometimes, and you can't be. You either need to catch lightning in a bottle at the right time, but you can't be an inconsistent team like that if you want to contend at the highest levels against the best teams like the Auburns and the Dukes and the Floridas.
Bruce Pearl had a really good way of putting this, I think, earlier this week, and he mentioned last year's Alabama team. He was asked about, hey, how can you've clinched the regular season outright? You've only got 2 losses at that point. How can you continue to improve? And he talked about the word upside. And he pointed to Alabama last season when they kind of stumbled to the finish line, but he was like, you could see it. You could see the upside. You could see when this team is clicking, they are going to be really, really unstoppable for most other teams in the country. That obviously bore itself out to be true. He pointed to that Auburn team 6 years ago. And he kind of hit on a point that I had never really heard him talk about before. He said, that team obviously had upside. They made the Final Four, even though they lost to Kentucky by 27 in the third to last game of the regular season. They were the 5 seed in the SC tournament, so not an incredible regular season. But he said that there was a lot of internal confidence about the upside they had, and he was like, we knew we were capable of making a run like that. I think that's one of the first times he said that, and so that is just such an important thing this time of year. Basketball is so much. And I think Auburn fans have done a good job of learning this because they're, coming over from the football side of things a few years ago. But I think over the last 2 or 3 years, they've done a really good job of sort of understanding this kind of stuff. The basketball's so much more about totality than it is about a couple games here and there. And that's why you saw Auburn, they go and they play a weird matchup at A&M and they're shorthanded and they're gassed. And Bruce Pearl admitted they may not have cared that much. He didn't say those words, but he said, hey, it's human nature after you win a championship. He's being they weren't juiced for that game. People didn't really care. They were like, didn't really matter. Let's look to Alabama on Saturday instead of overreacting. And so, I think this time of year, Nate Oates said it after losing to Florida. If I saw it correctly yesterday, he said he's not concerned about the losses. He's just concerned about the way they're playing in those games. And so there is a little bit of that for Alabama right now. I think where it's you see these trends that are icky for March Madness, like the turnover issues. Like you said, feeling like you're beating yourself. That's not what you want when you're going to March Madness, and not to give complete be oh, Auburn is better, but I think Auburn falling to A&M kind of felt like horrible matchup. All these other contexts, that team did beat you. That team went out and they kind of whooped your tail. I think that's more of what you want right now. You want someone to go out and earn the win. You don't want to go out there and be like, man, not playing your best right now. But that's why, look, I mean, you never know how much a game is really going to matter. I don't think. You could lose some games. Auburn could lose from here on out. They could lose Saturday. They could lose in the SC tournament, and they could go on a run to the Final Four. It doesn't really matter that much. But I do think, for these teams in particular, just having seen both of them up close this season and knowing the kind of confidence Alabama needs, this game feels like it maybe means a little bit more for Alabama because 4 of 6 feels it feels bad. But they've played a lot of good teams, and I honestly, until you and I recorded this morning, I didn't realize it was 4 of 6 for Alabama, and so they're still a good team. They were still vying for the 1 line. It doesn't feel like they're there anymore, but that's kind of crazy to think about, and so it goes to show how good they are. But man, if they can go in there and steal a win on Saturday, which they absolutely can, they can go and do that. I think it would mean a lot for them from a momentum standpoint. Whereas Auburn, I'm not saying they feel this way internally, but I kind of feel like it's let's just get to the tournament. You've been building and building. You look incredible. You're going to be a 1 seed. Let's go do this thing and try to make the Final Four.
I wanted to touch on this Auburn team and really get your perspective on kind of what makes this team special, because in a year where the SEC seems to have taken over college basketball, this Auburn team, even by those lofty standards, seems very, very different. They are 27-3 going into Saturday, 15-2 in the SEC. They as good as the SEC is, they won the regular season crown with still 2 games left to play. That is insane. What is it about this team that makes them special, that makes them unique, that have made them, as good as they have been this season?
It's a lethal combination for them of depth and experience. When you look at the eight, so there's 9-man rotation kind of this time of year for Auburn. 8 of those players are seniors. The only one who is not is Todd Pettiford, who we mentioned already, and I think is one of their most important players in March. I think if you have a 5-star freshman guard, he's going to be one of your most important players in March, because if he gets rolling, it's going to mean really good things for this team. And then you talk about the depth and having so many different dudes. I point to that Kentucky game, and that was never close. Like they could have won by even more than they did. But there was a moment in the first half where it kind of felt like Kentucky could have some momentum. Crowd was getting into it a little bit. I don't remember what the score was, but Chad Baker-Mazara just makes a step back 3 from the corner, and it was just kind of groan-inducing for everybody there. One of my buddies sitting next to me on press row he just said out loud, he said, "Too many dudes," and he's right. That's just kind of where this team is at right now. Johni Broome has not played very well the last 2 games. He may be playing himself out of the National Player of the Year award. Now, we'll see. Maybe that's a bit of a dramaticizing, because like I said, it is about totality, but single-digit scoring for him the last 2 games. Against A&M, it mattered. Against Kentucky, and really most of the season, when one guy is off, even if that guy is named Johni Broome, doesn't matter that much, because especially if they've got the other guys clicking. And so that is, I think, what is so impressive about this Auburn team, and you're starting to see it more this time of year, is just so many different options, so many different ways to beat you. And the way they can play different styles, I think, is really, really important. Now, again, it feels interesting for me to be saying this after Texas A&M style just put them in a blender in that game, and they had no answer to anything on either side of the court. Again, I think you want to zoom out and look at what they've done in their 27 wins on the season, as opposed to one loss. But that Florida loss for them, I think, also stoked a fire in terms of their defensive intensity this season. They were you allow, I think it was 91 points to Florida on their home floor. That felt bad. Florida's assist numbers in that game, Florida's 3-point shooting numbers in that game were like the worst for Auburn in a home game in like 4 years. And so that felt really, really bad for them. And that, I think, sort of locked in their mindset the rest of the way of the season, which was like, offense is great. Like Johni Broome, you got lots of shooters, whatever. But like they kind of feel like that's just going to come. That's just going to come with over the course of 40 minutes. They're going to do a good job executing. They've got enough players. Defense is something they can control. That's something that doesn't have to end with them taking and making a shot. It ends with them putting in a ton of effort. And so I think it's the combination of a lot of different things for this Auburn team. They do sort of have that wagon quality, like you mentioned, like a UConn. I think Duke has it. I think Florida has it. I think Houston maybe has it. I maybe just listed all the 1 seeds, and so that's kind of an easy exercise to do. But I mean, like here's the best teams in the country. Wild, right? That's crazy. They've got this gear that's just different. I think them being a national title contender, and this is not like a shocking statement to make, but it depends on all of those things going at once. If this Auburn team is going to win a national championship, or let alone go to the Final Four, because I'm even maintaining, like, I know I just really turn away from people who say like, "Oh, Final Four bust for this team." I'm like, have you watched college basketball before? Like, that is not the mentality you need to be taking. You need to be thinking about get to the second weekend in Atlanta where you're in front of 10,000 of your own fans, and then see what happens. Like, put yourself in that position. And so if they're going to do this and pull off a deep run, they've got to have their National Player of the Year playing well. They've got to have their surrounding pieces shooting well. They've got to have their defense going. That's a lot to ask, but I think what makes this Auburn team special is that is not an uncommon formula. Like, that's a lot a college basketball team has to have. Has Auburn had that in 75% of their games this season? Probably. Like, so it's very rare. And you mentioned like not beating themselves. They committed 13 turnovers against A&M. That was their second most all season, and like that's not that much. And so
Alabama averages 13 turnovers a game. Like, that is crazy.
It's wild, and they do a good job of limiting opposed. I think they're still top 10 nationally in defensive assist to turnover ratio, and so you could just go on and on about all the good qualities this team has. What's important this time of year, they need to focus on the things they are not good at. They need to focus on better defensive rebounding. They need to focus on the fact that their last 6 opponents, I think, have shot an average of 29 free throws. And so you're not going to improve this time of year unless you really sort of hunker down on that kind of stuff. I'm not saying a loss is good at any point, because Bruce Pearl laughed at that when they lost to Florida. Now, I kind of think it was a good thing, but he's allowed to say whatever he wants. I think maybe a little bit of a wake-up call. Not that the A&M loss was surprising, because it wasn't. at all. Like if you had told me, hey, Auburn's going to lose 2 SEC games, I would have said Florida and Texas A&M. Like it's just horrendous matchups for most everybody, but definitely Auburn. I think maybe getting an early March, shake your shoulders a little bit and say, hey, you are very easy to beat if someone just goes in there and pushes you around on the offensive glass. What are you going to do about it? Not sure that's the worst thing for this team, and obviously they're going to be up for it on Saturday. And so, yeah, I mean, lots has gone right for them this season. I think now that the pressure is coming of March, like, hey, you've been great. Now do it for 6 games in a row in the tournament. I think it helps that this team is, number one, so experienced. They're just loose too. Like they've got good character. They've got good personalities on this team of like guys who just really kind of don't care sometimes and are just kind of out there having fun. I think that's important this time of year as well.
The Alabama media contingent has been kind of paying attention to different bracket projections and, Lunardi and the bracketology and all that other fun stuff. And we're kind of at that point now where it's like, okay, where is Alabama going to land in the bracket? How would we feel about that path? And I think there was one, it might have been Lunardi's most recent projections. Alabama would not see, if the seeds held, an SEC team, I think, until they would maybe see Auburn in the championship game. And that's a separate conversation. But I use that to ask you this. What matchups or what teams or what kind of style would if you're Auburn, do you not want to see maybe on your side of the bracket, in your region, in your quad, to like what kind of style or what kind of team would make you guys think, oh, I don't know, like that's one that we kind of have to circle. That's one we kind of have to pay attention to. Just a team that could give Auburn fits. Just what would you guys look for in the bracket to be like, I don't know about that one. That one could be kind of shaky.
Defensive physicality and rebounding, because you look at Auburn's 3 losses so far this season. Now, Duke, giant. I mean, they're the biggest team in the country. They've got like 6 5-stars. So yeah, like, I mean, they're going to be huge. They're going to rebound over you. And I think their defense has only gotten better over the course of the season. I think they would play even better defensively against Auburn today. I think Auburn would play better defensively against them. You look at the 8-9 line, because that's just kind of where maybe I should go deeper. Maybe I should like look at Sweet 16s, Elite 8s. But again, it's this apprehension about like, I get it, y'all. I get you've been playing incredibly, but like you now have to physically go out there and win these games in March. Yeah, on bracket matrix, I mean, I don't think a team like an Illinois or a BYU would give you a lot of, honestly, UConn, because of its athleticism, maybe would be a bit of an issue. I mean, it's kind of scary, I think, for Auburn fans to look at what the 8-9s look like this season, because the 8-9s are just a bunch of usually really good teams who are not so good this year. And so they see like Gonzaga and UConn, and they're like, oh my gosh, could that really be the second round draw? Sure, those teams have a good gear, but like you are way better than those teams, like way better. They don't get to those records, and Gonzaga doesn't have a terrible record, but like they're playing in a bad conference without being a really shaky team. What's interesting right now, if you look on the 9 line, a team like Vanderbilt is one that's just going to be really, really tenacious on the offensive glass. And again, maybe it's just the recency bias for me, but I look at Auburn's problems in those 2 losses against Texas A&M and Florida, and it's look, Janai Broome is a post player through and through. He is a finesse big man. That is not I think we might have said this on the previous podcast, like that is not a derogatory term, but it is a fact that he's not Shaq out there. Like he's not Dwight Howard. He's not going to 2-hand grab a rebound and put it over you. He's not going to post up and dunk right on top of you. Dylan Cardwell can do those things, but Dylan Cardwell is not as good of an all-around player as Janai Broome. And so you've seen it these last couple games, and I think so much of it comes down to that. Like, because Broome makes so many things work, you've seen it. And look, you saw it against Alabama. Like they dropped from the perimeter. He hit a couple threes early. That's all he needed to get into a groove. I don't remember his line against Alabama, but I remember it was really stupid in terms of what he did all around. When he gets in that groove, it's just like he does so many different things. It's just hard to slow down. If they were to face a second round matchup where, or whatever round you want to talk about, and they've got someone who can really wall him up and kind of be concrete on the inside, that's going to be difficult. Someone who can execute double teams really well. I'm kind of getting into the nitty gritty here, but really when you look at a team that's won 27 games, I think it comes down to very, very individualized efforts. Kentucky and Texas A&M have done a really good job. Again, it's funny. They beat Kentucky by a lot, but they actually did a really good job on Broome. Amari Williams is a great player. for Kentucky. He was their best player in that game. He was really physical. And from like the second possession, their double team game plan was really, really interesting. They would basically have a guard come in. I think it was Owe, like the second possession kind of poked and then immediately went away. So they didn't truly double team, but all of a sudden, like, oh, Janai Baroum drops the ball, has to pick up his dribble again. That's mental. That throws off his rhythm. And then Texas A&M is just giant, and he was just kind of rushed. And they're not giant, but they're just really physical. He was kind of rushed offensively in that game, and so I just look at the interior so much. Florida, that's no question. Alabama fans just saw it. They are giant. I mean, the fact they have the big guys that they have, and even on the perimeter, I mean, those guards are stocky on the outside, and so when you have that type of matchup, I've just seen too many times this season Auburn play someone who is not huge. Their biggest player is 6'9", 6'10", kind of slender. Their guards are just good, not great. Auburn's going to win that game by 20. They've just got way too many weapons on both ends of the floor to be able to do that. And so I look at, in terms of matchup for this team, what is going to be the most physical defense, both inside and out. Maybe they won't see one that can really give them that many problems up until the Final Four of the Elite Eight, but I'm willing to bet with how good college basketball is all around this season, they're going to see someone in the second round or in the Sweet 16 that has the potential to give them problems as a defense.
To transition to Saturday, Alabama-Auburn, 1:30 p.m. Central, games in Neville Arena. I know Auburn's basically got everything on ice, at least as it pertains to the SEC and perhaps the NCAA tournament as well. Alabama team's coming in kind of sluggish. They've lost 4 of 6. They lost 4 of 6 games last year going into the NCAA tournament, but it was kind of a different 4 losses in 6 games. Like they lost a close one to Tennessee at home. Game day was in town. It was a really big deal. And after that, they just kind of slumped. Like there were a couple of games where you can tell that they were just like, get the 40 minutes over with. We're trying to get out of here. I think even Nate said, we asked about it, like, hey, second year in a row, you guys have lost 4 and 6. And he was like, yeah, last year they quit. This year, he's not sure that they have. And I think I tend to agree with him because that's you look at the way that they've lost these games. Auburn, sluggish start. Also, Auburn's just a very, very good team. But, you're down 9-0 to start, then you end up losing by 9. It's easy to point to that. Against Missouri, same thing. They're down 12-0 early. They end up losing by 12. Also, Missouri just shot lights out that game. And sometimes over an 18-game schedule, you're going to run into that. Tennessee, you had the lead with 36 seconds left. Nate Oates took full ownership of the fact that they just kind of fumbled it away over the last 30 seconds. And then against Florida's just a really good team, man. Like they pulled away in the second half and Alabama fought to bring it back close, but just sometimes you just get beat by better teams. And, I think I agree with Nate. I don't know that they've quit, but it's been a really tough stretch for Alabama. So I'm curious, just from your perspective, you've got a hungry team. I don't want to say desperate, but you got a hungry team in Alabama that's searching for those good vibes before the postseason. You've got an Auburn team that has everything clinched and they're trying to polish off what's been a really magical year for them. What are you expecting on Saturday? What do you think is ultimately going to happen?
Yeah, this is maybe another angle where you are not glad. You're never glad that you lose a game if you're Auburn, but maybe another angle where you point to Tuesday and saying, if you'd won that game, and again, you clinched on last Saturday, and if you win on Tuesday, like everyone keeps telling you how great you are, you continue being the best team in the country, and like everyone's talking about how incredible things have been in the SEC. So maybe that was helpful for them to again get woken up a little bit. I don't anticipate they ever would need any sort of motivation for Saturday, but it's also senior day. And they're also cutting down the nets after the game. And so that I think adds an extra element of, like, I remember when Auburn played Alabama a couple years ago, they were up by 17. I think it was the Brandon Miller team. And like, it looked like Auburn had the potential to pull the upset. I think Alabama won that game in overtime. And it really felt like, don't lose this game if you're Alabama. Like you're going to have to cut down the nets. That's going to be really awkward if you do that after. Not super awkward. I mean, it happens sometimes, but like, I mean, it's no Coach K ceremony after losing at home to North Carolina, but like I think you're motivated to close out things on the right foot. This fan base hasn't seen this team since the celebration Saturday, and there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of introducing them as the SEC champions. There's going to be a lot of the rivalry element of things, and Bruce Pearl and his staff will do a good job, I think, of communicating this week about Alabama being a potent team, Alabama being a team that certainly has the potential to come in. Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see a motivated Auburn squad on Saturday. I would be. You brought up the point of Auburn playing its best in big games. That is another thing that kind of struck me about the Kentucky game. Felt like a huge stage. Felt like a big opportunity for them. They've just kind of done it in those spots. They go out to Maui early in the season. Even at Duke, they lost that game, but like they played well in Cameron and had an opportunity there down the stretch. Alabama, that game in Tuscaloosa, everyone was talking about that game. It was the biggest game of the entire season, and I think that was the best we've seen Auburn play all year. And so that is the encouraging part for this team, is they do get up for really big spots. Again, you don't want to give them a crutch for Texas A&M, but it just felt like, I mean, it felt like a very scripted loss. Like it was A&M senior day, Wade Taylor having the potential to break the scoring record, Auburn coming off a celebration, Auburn being on a short turnaround. It just felt like everything was going against them to lose that game. So on the flip side, this one feels like, hey, close it out in front of your fans. You know, cap a tremendous regular season, try to get some momentum going into the postseason. So I think you will see a motivated Auburn squad. I think you will see a really good home court advantage. But all of those things being said, Alabama's a team you got to go out there and play well against, because I don't think Alabama's going to shoot. If Alabama shoots 5-26 from deep again, Auburn will win this game, and Auburn can probably point to whatever score it wants to win by. And so I don't think Alabama's going to shoot that poorly. Like you mentioned, Alabama's going to be equally motivated. I'm trying to remain excited for this game as I was going back in the offseason, because like I know Auburn's already clinched that stuff, but like I was looking at we all were like, them coming to Neville. Obviously Tuscaloosa was great as well, but like Aiden Holloway coming back, like LeBaron Philon, the former Auburn commit, coming back, Nate Oates, whom Auburn fans definitely respect. I mean, as one of the best coaches in the league, but like they love to hate, that sort of thing. And so, I'm definitely looking forward to this environment. I think it's going to create a really good backdrop for Auburn to get a big win on the last day of the regular season.
I'm curious to see the level of pride. I'm curious to see what kind of energy Alabama is able to bring. What's the response like after losing a really tough game? What's the response like after this tough stretch? And then also, like, I know that 2 of the 4 losses over this 6-game stretch have been on the road, but Alabama, I'm still going to maintain it until I see it otherwise. They have played really well on the road this year. And so can you go into a pretty hostile environment and find a way to compete and make it a game? And can you scratch a win across? Maybe. I think we'll see. Auburn is a bear to play, wherever you're playing them, but I'm sure especially at home, they're going to be extra juice and want to go out on the right way. Plus, and maybe this is just more for us, I'm not sure if Nate and Bruce probably feel this way, but there's probably a little bit of freedom from both of these teams, right? Like Auburn has clinched the regular season. They're going to be the 1 seed next week. Like nothing is really on the table in regards to that. Alabama, even though they lost to Florida, by virtue of Oklahoma beating Mizzou, they have clinched the double bye. So neither of these teams are going to play until Friday. They're going to have a week-long break before they have to go play another big high-stakes game again. I do wonder if that kind of allows both of these teams just a little bit of freedom to go out there and put on a show. I really don't know how else to put it, but just like, hey man, like you're not going to play again for a week. There's really, I don't want to say there's nothing to play for because it is the Iron Bowl, but like there's really like, there's no other than in-state pride. And like, we don't like those guys. They don't like us either. Like there's really not a ton on the table. And so I wonder if that means they will loosen up a little bit and just everybody go play. Like there's stakes, but maybe not as big a stakes as maybe we all thought there could have been when these two teams met a month ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of psychology you want to try to read into this time of year of like, does it matter how well you're playing going into because there's so many examples both ways. And for Auburn, in its own personal examples, they've won the SEC tournament twice under Bruce Pearl, like going on a run going into March Madness, feeling incredible going into March Madness. The first time they did it, they rode that high all the way in the Final Four. The second time they did it, they lost to Yale in the first round. And so it's like, you just really, you can't. And so I think that's to your point about Saturday, like just go out there and play loose and try to do your best and get ready for that week off, because I'm not sure I'm ready to equate any sort of end of the regular season result for anybody. Honestly, even Nashville, like I don't really think that's, unless someone like a Ole Miss or somebody or like Kentucky gets hot and wins it, and it's like, okay, here's a team that maybe you thought was kind of so getting hot. Like Florida winning it wouldn't surprise me. Auburn winning it wouldn't surprise me. Alabama, Tennessee, like even somebody like Missouri, like all those teams are really good. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they go out there and go on a run in Nashville. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there is an element of that from a selfish perspective, like two teams going out and just trying to have fun and just playing loose in front of what's going to be a tremendous crowd. Yeah, give that to me. give that to me all day. I think there's also an element, kind of an undercurrent of this game that is interesting. You mentioned how well Alabama's played on the road. Auburn's best games this year have been on the road, and they have a great home court environment. But even so they beat the life out of Ole Miss last week. That's probably the best they've played on their home floor. They should have lost to Tennessee. They pulled out a late 3-point shot and beat Tennessee, and they played very badly against Florida. Arkansas led them with 3 minutes to go. Now, that was a hungry Arkansas team. Auburn kind of pushed them away at the end. Georgia was within 2 possessions pretty much the entire end of the game. Again, Auburn was able to push them away and win by 12, so credit to them. But I think when you have, like, Alabama's got dudes, Alabama's got killers on offense, Auburn has that too. I wonder if there's an element of that. I don't wonder. I think there definitely is an element of that. Like when you go on the road and you can play a little looser and you want to be the villain, Auburn has played its best basketball away from home this season. Is that a good trend for the NCAA tournament? I think so, because Auburn's going to a bunch of neutral sites. They're going to play in Rupp in the first. I mean, unless Duke gets the number 1 overall and decides to take Atlanta, which they won't, because they have a massive following in New Jersey, and so they'll go to Newark. They just played in Rupp. They just actually that won't matter. They'll play in Lexington regardless. Anyway, they've played in Lexington this season. They've already played in State Farm this season, where they're going to play for the second weekend if they were to make it there. They've played tremendously in both of those places, and so I do think that's something to pay attention to in this game. Like Auburn's looking for a really good game at home against a really good team, because, like I said, Ole Miss probably is the best they've played on their home floor this season. On the road, it's like, they've won a bunch of neutral site games. Obviously, they went on the road and they beat that Ole Miss team on the road. They beat Alabama on the road. They beat Kentucky on the road. They're 8-1 in SEC road games. Like, they've won a bunch of games on the road this season, and so that's something I'm paying attention to. In terms of like individuals as well on Saturday, you and I talked about it a little bit during the 24/7 Sports video preview. But Denver Jones, they're not going to push him. He's Auburn's starting point guard. They're not going to push him to come back if he's not ready, because again, like you said, everything's kind of been clinched, but he was the guy in this previous game really doing a good job against Mark Sears. I think Sears shot 2 of 11 from deep, only 4 of 14 from the field. Don't expect him to do that again, but Jones just kind of catalyzes this backcourt defense. He's evolved into such a high level, tenacious defender. Auburn's got a bunch of really good perimeter defenders, but nobody like him where you can just say, go get that guy. Like, go get that guy and make life hard for him. You kind of saw that against Texas A&M, even more so than A&M kind of having some uncharacteristic three-point shooting, which they're a horrible three-point shooting team, and they shot 41%. So it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to lose that game in College Station. But even more so than that, like backside cuts to the basket, communication on defense, guys just kind of blowing by the perimeter, like things other than just shooting when you don't have your best defender. Those things start to add up. I think maybe that's stuff that doesn't show up in the box score. And so if he's not able to go, that's a big notch for Alabama. That is a really, really big deal for Alabama, just because of, again, Auburn's got so many guys and they play really well together, but it also takes away a bench guy, because now Todd Pettiford has to start. And now, because Todd Pettiford isn't starting, Chad Baker-Mazara is the backup point guard. Because Chad Baker-Mazara is there, Ja'Kai Howard has to play minutes. He's been a really iffy freshman this season. So all of a sudden you can start to throw off these rotations for Auburn. I know that's not what you asked at all, but I think Denver Jones for Auburn is a key player for me in this game, because also on the offensive end, I think his last 9 games before getting injured, he was shooting 58% from 3-point range. So like that's going to get the job done as well. And just he's so steady on both ends of the floor. So definitely somebody that Auburn would love to have healthy in this game. But at the same time, if he's not, they know that this isn't the Sweet 16. This isn't the Elite Eight. I don't think they're going to push him to come back.
Yeah, well, and especially like looking specifically at this matchup, like I know that he did a really good job of making life hard on Mark Sears in that first Alabama-Auburn game a month ago. Since then, Mark Sears has put up 30 points in 3 of his last 5 games. So Mark has put the superhero cape on. Like, it is ready to go. He is playing lights out. Who is going to step up and help him? Like I think if at the beginning of the season, you would have been like, yeah, it's supposed to be Mark and Grant Nelson. Grant Nelson hasn't necessarily played very well this year. At this point, it might just be kind of who he is. So can a guy like Aiden Holloway step up off the bench? Can a guy like LeBaron Philon, who, he struggled a little bit. I think he kind of went through that freshman lull. He seems to have come out the other end the last few weeks. Can Chris Youngblood, a mid-major player of the year type player last season at South Florida, can he get hot? It seems like he's only able to hit shots against Mississippi State. Against everybody else, he's just kind of like good, not great, right? So Mark Sears is going to play, I think, lights out, whether or not I think Denver Jones plays, but he's going to need help, right? And especially against a team like Auburn on the road in that environment, he's going to need help. So who can step up and help Mark? And, really, I think that's going to be a really key question that needs to be answered if Alabama wants to make this run. My last question for you here, Nate. I know we talked during the football game kind of loosely about this. I had made the loose comment after the first Alabama-Auburn game a month ago. How confident are we that these teams could actually legitimately play 4 times this year?
Not at all, probably, right? And I don't think it has anything to do with Alabama not being good. I think Alabama's probably one of the 8 or 9 best teams in the country. But just the draw, I think it would have to take, even in Nashville. Like, Auburn's been the best team in the league all year. I'm not going to pick them to win the SEC tournament just because, like, I don't know. It would be too easy, right, for them to just be the best team and then go to Nashville and continue to be the best team and then go to the NCAA tournament where they want to be the best team and win a title. Like, it'd just be a lot. It'd be a lot trying to go on at once. And then in terms of now look, I don't think they would try to do this. I think the committee would probably avoid it because of 2 SEC teams, but like, Bama's pretty firmly a 2 seed now. I don't think they'd be in Auburn's region, but I mean, I don't think there are any rules against it if they were. I mean, that was the no, Duke and UNC met in the Final Four. It wasn't Elite Eight. So like, yeah, they could, like, I mean, look, I would love it. Obviously, I did a story this week talking to the 1999 Auburn team, which was kind of like the best team before this one. They've had other, but like best regular season team before this one, and that team beat Alabama 3 times in the season. I think they beat them by a combined like 30 point margin of victory each game. One of those was the SEC tournament, and so Cliff Ellis, who was their coach, then just kind of talking about that. But yeah, I mean, I think a season sweep, and I haven't even necessarily thought or talked about this very much yet, but like a season sweep of Alabama in this season when the SEC is so good, it's another like cherry on top of all these things Auburn has accomplished. I mean, they can set the new program record for wins in a regular season on Saturday. They can set the new SEC record for wins on Saturday, and so all of these things, if you did it with a win over Alabama, I think would just obviously make it that much sweeter. I think maybe I would lean more toward playing in Nashville, like as opposed to the NCAA tournament. I mean, obviously, like a 16 team bracket versus a 68 team bracket. So I think that's probably more likely. But man, knowing the potential for Alabama to, like, it was interesting. It's interesting to hear you say, like, last year that they kind of quit toward the end of the year. That team went to the Final Four. Like, it really doesn't matter until you start up the tournament and how well are you going to play over the course of 5 or 6 games. And so the fact that this team hasn't quit, the fact that this team has just kind of lost games to really good teams in really difficult spots, like on the road against Missouri and Tennessee. Like, I think Florida and Auburn are the 2 best teams in the league. And so, like, I know it sucks to lose on your home floor, but like, those teams are awesome and they are going to beat a lot of teams like that. And so I think Alabama has the potential. They have the potential again to make a run in March, at least, if not just to the second weekend, and then kind of just see what happens from there. And so, fingers crossed for as many matchups between these teams as possible. Another reason being that, like, you haven't seen it as much this week. I mean, maybe it'll kind of ramp up closer to game time, but like, I mean, these fan bases from a basketball perspective have just sort of taken on a life of their own. Like, it's almost completely different from how you would see these fan bases interact for football. They just kind of, I think they're both having a lot of fun and just kind of riding the wave of what this modern success has been for their programs. But it's been really fun to see them, like, go back and forth. I mean, they took victory laps about Auburn not building a standalone practice facility now. And Auburn fans were taking victory laps last night over the arena being like half full for the senior day festivities. Like, that is the point where we're at, where it's like you're seeing them like take these little holes and these two best programs in the SEC over the last like 5 or 6 years. And it's so funny to see them like come in and make these little remarks here and there. And so hopefully, I mean, Saturday, I love Aiden Holloway. We talked about this last time. Like, great kid. He was awesome to talk to and kind of get to know last year. And the fact he's one of the best bench players in the league has been really, really, like, he fit in that system so well, and so obviously that's great for him. There's not gonna be an Auburn fan in that building that is thinking the way I just did. Like, I mean, that's gonna be, it's gonna be something else when he, like, Bronny James coming here last year was, and not because they should care, like, it was just that it was Bronny James. That was really fun, but like this is just gonna be something different. And then again, they love to hate Nate Oates. I don't think the LeBaron Philon thing is going to be there that much, but I think if they thought a little bit more about it, it probably should be, because like someone who's initially committed to your program and then ultimately ended up at your rival. This Tennessee was a great environment for Auburn because College Game Day was there. Florida was not good enough. They lost what? Now you don't lose by 11 because of your environment, but like it was not good enough, and it should have been because Florida's even better than Tennessee is. This will probably be the best crowd they've had all season for any game, and I think it needs to be. I think that they're going to need that sixth man throughout the game in order to beat someone like Alabama, because like you said, it's a good point. Like Nate Oates is just going to tell these guys, like, you locked it up. You're playing on Friday. We're going to have a long break. Go out there and make a really sucky day for your rival that celebrated after you lost to Tennessee. Now, again, that's not really what happened, but I mean, there's lots of motivational, buttons he can push in this game. I'd be stunned if Alabama doesn't shoot the ball better and look better than it did in Tuscaloosa. And so by that logic, Auburn has to play a similarly good game in order to win. That we know they have that gear. Can they do it on their home floor? I think they're going to need that. They're going to need that crowd behind them in order to do it.
I would consider this a big game, even if the stakes aren't as potent, I suppose, as maybe what we thought that they could be. It's still a rivalry game. It's still, I like my guys and I don't like your guys, and I think that's going to add to the fun of it. So I'm really excited to see what kind of version of Alabama shows up. And with regards to, are we going to see 4 Alabama-Auburn basketball games this year? I think I agree that it's probably going to be matchup dependent, because if the SEC tournament started tomorrow, Auburn's obviously the 1 seed. Alabama would be the 3 seed. So they wouldn't meet until the final, but Alabama would have to beat, if the seeds hold, Mizzou, who they lost to, and then they would have to go beat Florida, who they lost to. So like, I don't know. That would be a tall order. I think confidence level not very high that we see 4 matchups between these 2 teams this year, but I suppose anything is possible, especially in the month of March. So we'll see ultimately what this month brings. Nathan, I always appreciate the time you coming on to chat Alabama-Auburn. Nobody does it better. We will be back, Roll Pod, sometime early next week to recap some spring ball and touch on some hoops as well. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, even our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 24/7 Sports, as well as Auburn Undercover. If you want to read all of Nathan's great work on the Auburn website, part of the 24/7 Sports Network, we would appreciate it if you guys did that as well. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We will talk to you all again soon.